Here we are at Hanau. This is the final setup, well, the final situation on the October 30th battlefield. The French won a minor victory by points. In terms of the reality of the situation, I feel like they accomplished their goal, but I don't think their goal is terribly hard to accomplish. So it kind of makes sense. I mean, they certainly could have done much, much better and cleared the road to Frankfurt. But, I don't know how much difference that really makes, because they need a certain amount of force to defend the road over here near the Lamboy Bridge, etc. So, and that amount of force is a fair amount of what they have on the board. Okay, let us take a look at what we're on magical ground here, right? We're modding the game now, because it doesn't have a transition between the 2 days. We've come up with some ideas on how to deal with that. So de Reed, the French army had continued their retreat towards Frankfurt and decided to try again. After a little fighting overnight, in the morning, de Reed launched another assault. De Reed's not in any position to assault anything, but this will be another 12-turn scenario. Allied set up first, French next, but we're not playing with the setup that's here. We're trying to extrapolate what might have happened, what might the historical situation, what might the battlefield look like after the results of that first day that we fought. So all the troops are placed south of the Kinzig, excluding the town of Hanau. Well, south of the Kinzig is definitely not over here, and I feel like the Austrians did a good job of holding that. Units 1 and 3 are absent. Okay, so this is the kill ratio here, as well as a bunch of artilleries. Everything else with a step loss per unit is placed. Well, it sure either wasn't a very bloody fight, or my recovery estimates are way off, right? We got a lot of dead units here, and a lot of units that have taken more than one hit. But we have a fair number that have taken no hits, and I'm going to recover some points, so it may work out. Are placed at the option of the Australian Bavarian player, I'm guessing anywhere over here. Well, now we're going to give them behind this streamline as well. I don't see any reason to force them ahead of that. So what happens for the French? Marmont and Bertrand, 40 and 46. Well, I don't have Bertrand on the board yet, so apparently he makes it in. Let's get that. 40 and 40. 40 through 46? 40 through 46. So all of Bertrand is coming on overnight. I'll figure out what the fuck this all means. I'll put them up there because they're coming from Leipzig. As well as the artilleries of the guard are placed north and west of Kinzig. Oudinot's young guard enters on turn 1 unit per turn. The road coming from somewhere. We have a bunch of artillery. Okay, so here's what's different. The French succeeded better in the historical. Oudinot starts coming in 1 unit per turn on turn 1, and he's probably the rear guard here. It looks to me like what I got for the French was less of an effective victory than the French actually got, and what I've got now is, here it's Marmont and Bertrand being on the board, and I guess all over here with de Reed just down here, being the historical, and some kind of, most of the French army has already left. So I think there's a lot more success in terms of the French having forced their way towards Frankfurt in that first day. So I did a lot worse, probably. This looks impossible to stop. What are the victory conditions? De Reed must cut the road to Frankfurt. Well, I have that. If the French player controls that hex, this one, and all Marmont's units have left voluntarily by the road, then he can claim a great victory. Well, that's not good enough. I got to get a lot more than Marmont off the board. How much, I don't know. But the only things that are on the board in this scenario are Marmont, Bertrand, and the artillery, and two guard artillery units. None of this cav, none of this other stuff. So my feeling is I'm allowed Oudinot and Bertrand, and that's it to avoid the great victory. Okay, what is the other option though? The other option is simply controlling this hex. And I'm going to aim for that great victory and try to get as many units off as possible. I don't think this is going to be terribly interesting because the Austrians have suffered a great deal of losses. And the French have not exited any units. So there's a lot more French. Now, what is up with these fuckers? Why aren't they anywhere? That's an interesting question. I've got units 36. Okay, this is the rest of Marmont. I guess that comes on as well. I only saw some of Marmont come on in the early part of the evening. All right. What else am I doing? Well, I decided to recover units, fatigue, to allow units to have maybe 1 turn's worth of movement or so for dispositioning, plus they can recover a hit. Or they can move all night and put themselves anywhere behind their lines. I think the cav is going to pull back to behind this streamline just for safety. Like I said, these guys are going to pull back behind here. And otherwise, I think I'm kind of free to set up, within those realms. I'm going to be playing around with paperwork, erasing things and whatnot, and trying to position things and trying to figure out what the hell happens. What's up with these guys? Well, yeah, that's an interesting question. I think a couple of these are coming in from here, and these guys, one of which is actually from La Motte, are going to be coming in from over here in whatever condition they're in. I'm not sure how much they're going to get to recover. I don't know how friendly I want to be is basically the issue. But yeah. Now, Hanau is essentially unimportant, although I could set up artillery up on the town to threaten the road, and that would make the French position somewhat more annoying in terms of yeah, I'll have to string around up here and work my way down and avoid those big guns, or I could just set up Druitt's artillery and take out anything that sticks its nose up. But all right, now we have an idea of what the path forward is, and now I have to think about actually executing it. Following my weird little setup rolls, a bunch of recovery has taken place, and Marmont is in position to head the assault on Frankfurt. I got, what's his name, Bertrand up here. And Nansuti's cav sitting up here. MacDonald, infantry support over on the flank. Hey, wait, shouldn't the cav be in the flank? Yeah, I got the cav in the center. What the hell? I don't know. That's where the clear ground's going to be. And The artillery is shifted slightly. Friant's infantry, guard infantry, I could have moved them further by my plans, rules, orders, whatever. Had I done that, it would really mean putting. I would have to put somebody on the line to protect the guns along the river. Although honestly, yeah, I'm not so sure. They could have cut a little further down, but basically they came up to a traffic jam facing where Bertrand's going to be, and I would rather keep the guard to back things up. Victor is holding the back door here, just in case, as is, and this is probably the most effective of them all, Sebastiani's cavalry. The big idea here is, I don't know. I wanted to recover an artillery piece. I'm keeping that massed battery together and going to deal with that. What I haven't done yet is written any orders. I got to write my orders for the new day, and then we'll see what happens. I think this is going to be a fucking cakewalk for the French, though. The thing is, it's expected to be an Austro-Bavarian attack, but there's forces over here. Crossing the river's a pain in the ass, especially when you're facing artillery somewhere. And it's just, it does not look like a pleasing situation for the Austro-Bavarians to try to stop. But casualties don't matter in this one. Only one thing matters, this road. It's time to delay the French army, what's left of it. And, you know, most of it is perfectly fine. Nobody's left the board. I should be able to force my way past the remainder without any real difficulty. And eventually what we're going to see, I think, is the French trying to hold a position back here, which means it's time for me to start reading the rules for what I'm doing next, which probably won't make any of us happy. All the orders written. The French army, for the most part, is going to decamp and try to get its way into here. It's got slightly different orders for different pieces, so Marmont's trying to just bust right through. He's in the best position to do that. I'm probably going to leave this artillery behind, though. Maybe, I don't know, I probably can't attach it to Druid, but I'm going to leave it where it is as long as possible to help dominate that roadway, because Druid is going to be moving to take this stream area and sort of dominate the road there. Friant's going to move in support of that with an intention to move to Frankfurt. I'm not allowed to keep a lot of units sort of on the board, as far as I can tell. What the requirement is, it's hard to tell, but I've got sort of this auto victory type thing that I'm allowed. If I get enough out, I've done good enough. Sebastiani doesn't have orders, but my plan is to use him as mainly a rear guard. Victor's going to help a little bit, but the main assault to begin with is going to be Marmont and MacDonald, Nansouty handling, again without orders, the cav side of that, which is very important because most of Splenny's force is cav right now. Now, on the other hand, the Austrians are moving Clenau and Fresnel over to here. I'm keeping Becker's in Hanau. I don't know why. He may have some artillery, I don't know, which could intercede or have some impact on the road transit. But it's not a short scenario. So Oudinot, the trailing force, can make his way through. I think this is the initial French movement. You'll notice a couple of things. First of all, not everything moved. There's sort of a traffic jam going on, and I certainly don't believe that you have to try to follow orders in the face of a traffic jam. So Friant is holding back a little bit, whatever. And I don't think that's a problem at all. I don't really think these guns need any support in infantry, which is why Friant's all in column here. Also, skirmishers were deployed. Now, I didn't I just did this time because I'm like, oh yeah, you know, I remember this is how you make attacks in this game. I don't know that I really needed them in the last game. There might have been cases where the initial Austrian attack up here would have preferred to use skirmishers, especially since I could place them in the forested areas and get the same firepower value. I didn't pay much of a price for advancing, although there was a place where, you know, there was a clear area where I could shoot into the forest and decimate the unit in the forest and do damage to the unit in the forest that it really couldn't do an equivalent chance of damage. But here's the problem. This unit could have had a skirmisher out. This unit could have had 2 skirmishers out. So I am going to remove 2 of these skirmishers anyhow. Because I didn't set up with skirmishers in mind, but now that I'm attacking, I'm like, oh yeah, skirmishers should be up. And I think that's fair. Had to be a little careful of these Cossacks. I don't know how, you know, they're still fairly impressive attack critters. So Nansuti's moving down. He's going to be vital to clearing this path because there's so much cav under Splenny here. And the only thing that expended any effort at all was Marmont. We'll roll the attacks. I don't expect a whole lot to happen there. The end of the first turn. The forces over here got some artillery in the front, scared away the one skirmisher so that we didn't have to take fire, basically. But now we have no skirmisher cover. Doesn't matter. Yeah, this is a crappy unit. It should not be allowed more than 1 skirmisher. Things are not spelled out in the scenario instructions as to any special rules for skirmishers, but this unit is such a weird thing that I think it's a single skirmisher unit. I'm not sure. Fresnel's moving forward. I'm not happy with the orders I gave Fresnel at the beginning, but what I want to do is I want to get Beckers's force moving behind the river. I want to get Fresnel in the town with his cannons. Because I don't think all those cannons up here are going to help me. It's going to take me too long to get them deployed to stop things. But if I can put them over here, they could do something. Is this thing any danger? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Yeah, actually I've got a plink there, so I didn't see that. I think that means these guys are going to want to kind of hide better. I don't know. It's hard to find a place where I can hide. I guess I'll take another plink. I can't really face these guns. I can't face those guns. And as long as they're all set up, it's hard to find a safe place in Hanau. But yeah. And I guess that's the end of the first turn. This really feels almost like an academic exercise at this point. I can't see how the French are going to be stopped here. But what's going to be kind of interesting is managing the rear guard, bringing this up in place and keeping everything protected and whatnot. And I think what that's really going to come down to is me not following my orders well and foot dragging here to some extent. Although crossing the river is hard, and Sebastiani can go without orders and do what he wants because he's a Cav Corps. Not sure how I feel about that. I feel like NBS kind of locks you in a little too much. It's like the looseness of the orders in this game makes me feel like I enjoy it best when I take the orders really, really loosely, more so than I would normally. And without hex numbers, without geographical names of most objects, of most areas of the map, yeah. Aim for the Lamboy Wood, What, I can patrol all throughout here? Am I responsible for all of it? Can I concentrate? Those kind of questions are all very, very difficult to express. Now, the local commander could make reasonable choices within within a large area of operations, if it's granted to them. But that gives them more freedom. You could tell them, defend the whole map if they are allowed to concentrate wherever they want and whatever, and then basically they have no orders. So if you start reading the orders too loosely, where you're allowed to concentrate within your orders span and there's no real limitation, well, there's nothing like. So NBS has this idea of the commander or the headquarters is bolted down on a defensive order, or on an order that puts you in a defensive position, which means you don't have a whole lot of flexibility. You have unlimited flexibility within the range of the commander where he's bolted down, but you have nothing like being bolted down here. What you have is the leader is where the command radius comes from, and it's not as big a deal as it is in NBS to be out of command. It's a little morale penalty, and it's just it's a lot less. I don't know. Anyway, I'm just delaying because I kind of don't want to stop playing, but I have to. I have to go to work, and I can't really squeeze in another turn, I don't think. I don't know. It's still a little early. Just the potency of artillery in the Napoleonic era, but the potency of cavalry. As I start this new turn, Nansudi charges these, whatever the hell they are, Cossacks or something. I don't know what they are. But, I mean, they're shitty. But they're what's holding this flank because the coalition cavalry has been kind of beaten up. These guys were holding the front of the line over here or against the artillery for a while. So you're left with horrible choices. I was far enough away with the beginning of the charge, these guys could have just disordered and run away. But then this countercharge, or this initial charge, could come in against the infantry formations. It could anyway. Well, no, it couldn't. Or I could just sit there and take it, and what you'll see is the little red number there, a 1 on that case, a 3 on that case, is the melee strength. So the melee strength per step. So, I'm looking at a third the strength if I just sit around and take the charge, and I'm going to get the crap beaten out of me. And that's what Nansudi wants to do, is he wants to do something that neutralizes these cav. And then the final option is I can try to countercharge. Now, I'm still weaker. I'll be attacking, and I'll be at not great odds, but something good could come of that. Anyway, I try, but these are low morale units. Only one of them succeeds. Maybe neither one would, and I'd just be taking it like standing there on my own. Or these infantry could have been exposed. I probably should have thrown them into square just to make sure. But this cancels Nansudi's charge, and that's the big bonus, and it'll be taken care of right away. It may also leave him sitting there, or else he has to blow the cav and disorder it. This cav does a pretty good job of kind of opening things up so that I can slip in. I couldn't get into a position where I could really, really do a number on this artillery, even though I drove the underlying infantry out of the way. In which case, well, it's time to throw out some skirmishers. And no real effect to all of that. No real effect anywhere other than non-city's charge. Everywhere else, the traffic jam still remains. And I just, don't want to clutter things up. This unit got scared away due to the artillery. Sebastiani says, you know what? Can't let Nansudi get all the glory as a cav leader. So we're going to come over here and harass this advance over here. And that's that. Right, so for the coalition side of things, we had a cav charge here that there was a failed attempt to create a square, which means the unit was disorganized, but I slipped an infantry in and fired on it and routed it. That means no cav charge. Might mean less casualties overall, but that's okay, It also means less risk of casualties against my cav here. DeReed has run over to give orders. You can see I'm starting to use non-number counters to handle fatigue again where needed. What else? Yeah, so Marmont's attack is kind of being blunted here. Cav are potent. Infantry, not so much in this era. They have their place. They're necessary, very necessary. But it's not Civil War. They can't do it alone. Let's see. We had some fire coming down here against that column. One thing that's important to note, I didn't go over special rules for this scenario. The special rules basically say you only handle the first 4 special rules. The French line of communication is now the road to Frankfurt. Yeah, I don't know about that. I don't, given that I'm in the way, but it sure ain't Leipzig. Oudinot is the tail of my forces, so I kind of feel like I don't really have a line of communication anymore. Again, this is, because this first day didn't play out the way it did historically. 1 through 4 means lines of communication rules, the river, the terrain, and Hanau, more terrain. The rest of it, most notably, you can lose Napoleon and it's okay today. Yesterday it would have sucked. There's no army morale. I guess it's a do or die situation at this point. The artillery of the old guard. I don't know. Do they lose a step? What the hell? I'm beginning to feel like maybe they're lying. Some of them I can get rid of, like the Bavarian morale. So here's the thing. The artillery of the old guard, it makes sense. It wouldn't be on the board. And probably Napoleon's not on the board in the historical scenario. In fact, he's not. Neither of them is. So that's why those are omitted. So yes, we should play with those still. Army morale, though, has gone away. We're not going to bother with that. The losses that are already taken, the armies are here to do what they do. And I guess, yeah. Now, the Bavarian morale and the guard, I'm going to still hold that too, because again, the guard isn't on the board in the historical scenario. I would say the Bavarians are still scared of them. You don't see yesterday having convinced them that the guard is just a bunch of pansies yet. Okay, towards the start of turn 3-ish, I kind of screwed up, but we won't talk about that. French were unable to figure out a way to deal with this thing. Set up in line here. I figure I'm pretty safe in that case. I've got a chance to make a morale check to go into square if need be. Some artillery fire coming through here, but mainly I'm throwing skirmishers out to screw with the line, the spare or whatever. But things look really bad because what's his name? Sebastiani. I wanted to call him Spinoli or something. I don't know. Definitely an Italian style name. Comes charging in, and where the Austrian forces and Bavarians turn into squares, I avoid. But when you're facing a big column like this, there are some yummy targets like artillery pieces and stuff like that I can pick on no matter what. The key problem, there is no cav to defend this thing. Turned out to be a pretty good turn for the French. First of all, obviously, screwing with this line pretty heavily. I got routing units, we got destroyed units. Over here, similarly, charged by this into the flank of those guns, took them out, and now this cav is across the stream and in a bad place where pretty much, well, I can launch a charge. I can launch a charge at close range. Uh-oh. Across a stream, though, which has some impact. I may not want to actually advance into this hex. I don't have to. Yeah, I do, because I captured guns. There was an extra gun there that it could sneak away. So, all right, we'll do what we're doing. But yeah, across the stream drops the cav to strength 1, which makes it significantly weaker. I don't get a chance to rally, but I do get a chance to shoot first. Not rally, but I don't get a chance to form square. He can just turn in and attack me. I don't know. Guns are off the map. Don't want to try to figure it out. Okay. And that'll put it onto the Austrian side. All right, and this is the results after the Austrian turn. That charge was a failure completely. We got disordered instead. But it got us out of there, I mean, we took fire anyway, so I don't know. Could have taken withdrawal fire, but it was helpful. We might have caused, if we caused any result other than a 0 with no star, we would have caused an extra casualty. But here's the thing. Line infantry is not bad at melee against cav. I think. It's one of the problems with the game. The way the rulebook is written, and I don't know if this is more me not being able to assimilate the rulebook well or something actually in the weaknesses in the rulebook, and there are quite a bit where it's, fuzzy and stuff. Just want to make sure, because maybe it's here. No. The melee value of a line infantry unit doesn't seem to be impacted by the fact that it's being cav charged in and of itself, right? And it makes sense. I mean, it's almost like a pike formation with fixed bayonets. So I can see that, but something vaguely makes me think there was some kind of rule that made that different. Like, I found a rule that caused some sort of difference. It might have been flanking, it might have been something else. And also the fact that they're embedded in these weird things with all kind of pictures around. The pictures are problematic for me. They decrease my capability to remember what's in the rules. I know that may seem, especially if there's color, I know that may seem counterintuitive or whatever. But I looked up under charge. I looked in the unit type for both cav in charge formation and infantry in line. I can't find anything, but something's still vaguely gnawing at me. Quite often, vague gnawing means that there is such a rule. I can't imagine where it would be at this point. So if I found it before and you've been like torturing yourself watching all these videos for some reason, yeah, feel free to let me know. But I don't think I don't think it's there. But again, you throw a lot of color and distraction to me, and I stop being able to retain information as well, think. There's sort of an active process that is existing when I'm reading rules or listening, reading a book, listening to something. But the more noisy you make the experience for me, the more likely that I just it all turns into a blur for me. It's something to do with the way I process stuff. Some people, love the bustle of magazines filled with pictures and blaring stuff. That became all the rage at some point in the 90s or something, I think. And I have never recovered, and then the web was largely built that way. But yeah, reading off a computer is hard for me no matter what. Anyway, I'm making this game up, like the scenario victory conditions and such not, because there's nothing to support them in the actual game. The victory conditions for this scenario, the historical scenario, one in which most of the French army from yesterday has already withdrawn from the field, is particularly has its own weirdnesses, though, in the sense that I could see that you hide the Austrian army for most of the game and let the French try to get a lot of units off the map and then try to capture this space through an intense attack with whatever they leave back behind. I could also see where, because it would be easy to get Marmont off the board, but you're not going to, as the French, you're going to want to leave him here as long as possible until, the last couple turns of the game. The problem, of course, is you probably can't engineer anything that. If both players are playing this to win those victory conditions, they're going to do some really, really fucking odd stuff, but they're also really not, it's not going to help if they both do really odd stuff. If only the Austrians do really odd stuff and the French decide to withdraw their units early and stuff, it may give the Austrians a win where they shouldn't have one. So far, the last couple of games I've seen really, when you're faced with these kind of odd situations, I don't feel like this designer does a great job of coming up with what the victory conditions should be. We had something vaguely similar in the minis group that I interacted with, which was a game that was about this light, which is weird for a minis game, right? Pretty much. It was even lighter. The Cav interaction was even less impressive and everything. Cav was not all that potent. It was, but that was a situation where I felt like half the scenarios we were kind of making up what the rules were on the fly. Like the guy who was hosting or whatever was like, yeah, well, this is the positioning and here's what your goals are, and we'll discuss afterwards whether or not you succeeded or something. They usually didn't have numerical goals, which is closer to what I'm doing, right? The French want to get a bunch of stuff off. I don't know how to express what they want to do. To be honest, because we were so delayed, we probably want to be getting stuff off particularly early in the game, and be able to set up the next sort of waypoint on the pursuit that's coming from behind. Try to find some defensible terrain or something. But the key thing is saving this part of the army. And I'm just standing here like, wow. I mean, this is the kind of scenario that I think is really, really hard to write good victory conditions for. The French can't afford to take losses. They don't really care that much how much damage they do to the Austrian and Bavarians. On the first scenario, they do because it improves their chances on the second scenario, supposedly, but there's no carryover that's built in. And then, you know, if this scenario were written more generically for like how many corps you have or whatever, how many commands you want to get off the map, and you know, you could get everybody off the map and not hold this hex. The Austrians grab it, and you've just lost the game by that second scenario. So maybe there's a requirement that you hold this hex, whatever that, and this is really what I would think. And then your victory conditions, if you hold this hex, are based on how many of your commands you get off the board. And I think something like that could be written for the combined scenario where you wouldn't have to worry about trying to score points for the first day. Scoring points for the first day is fine if you just want to play that alone. The second day scenario would tell you what you got off the map on the first day. And it would basically allow you to say, well, I have to get this many steps or this many commands or whatever off the board, but also hold this hex. And that's kind of what I'm trying to approximate here. We'll see. So the French Nansouty launches another charge for whatever that's worth. Yeah, that costs him another point of fatigue. But elsewhere, and I'm just trying to see if I've caught up my fatigue levels everywhere. I don't think I've done anything with McDonald, and I'm afraid to move him because of this cav. However, I could pick on these cav. I'll just leave it as it is. Give him a rest point. Yeah. So Napoleon's given Friant some orders. He's moving to Druid. I'm going to try to sweep around here. Sebastiani, although he pretty much blew his cav, might as well, he can try to recover them this turn, and he pretty much drove away the forces that were on that road. Bigger problem is this unit here of Marmont's. It can't rally this turn. I've notionally said that's a line of communication for retreat. I don't know even what to think about this, because there's nowhere to retreat to, but you don't want to make it so that they like just route and mill around in the center of the map or something. That doesn't match, the idea of a route, and they'll be very quickly recovered that way. So I don't want the fact that there's nowhere to go but Frankfurt for Napoleon to come to his advantage. So, I'm finding some place to run him off to. Take a look at it as scattering the unit or whatever. In terms of the effect for the scenario, it's essentially this. In any of the scenarios, being routed off the map or disordered off the map is pretty much the same as being destroyed. There's no distinction between step losses and retreating off the map. So here it actually makes sense. In most situations, yeah, that disordered unit or whatever probably took less losses than a unit that took all its step losses. In neither cases, the entire unit likely just dissolved, but whatever. Okay, and on the Austrian side of things, the only bright spot, there were a couple of rallies, but the big bright spot was I fired and then actually meleeed this unit and threw it back. You gotta remember, and it's hard for me because I play so many Civil War games, American Civil War, that, melee doesn't feel like as good an option as it is in the Napoleonic era. In this case, it was definitely a good choice. I had 3 to 2, because these are grenadiers and they're big, although they're rapidly diminishing due to fire. My big problem, this cav here prevented me from bringing more of Hanau into play. He's got another, it's got to be another grenadier there. But I've got some cav here to try to disable mine. It creates sort of a problematic situation because there's stream here. I could stand and receive and let them charge across the stream, or I could try to interdict. But either way, we'll see what happens at the end of that. Otherwise, and that's kind of holding up Becker's command from making its way into there. And I guess that's the end. Going to turn 5. Some units routed off the map, or failed their recovery. You could just leave them lying around in disorder and wait until you get a leader there. I don't have any leaders that are really good for the Austrians in terms of like morale, so. It seems more like a recovery turn for some of the French at least, Sebastiani especially. I thought last turn would be enough recovery. Now I got a bunch that needs to be rallied. This routed unit, there's nobody, anyone could catch him. So he's just going to leave the map. Whatever that means. I don't think he's heading that way. I think he's just dispersing. Because he's got nowhere to run to. And I'm treating route different from disorder, because a disordered unit could just hide in the woods or something. I don't buy that with the routed units. Under the basic rules, routed units just go away. I think if you don't do something to get them back, they're going to disintegrate as a unit, at least for the course of the battle. Started off with a couple of charges. The first one got countercharged here, and it was actually a fairly effective countercharge. Froze that and meant that MacDonald couldn't advance in this direction, which was the point to the charge. But another charge here has caught the Grenadiers unable to form square, and that's going to be problematic. End of the French turn, I mean, it feels like this is over. Speyer is down to 1 unit. This is going to route off the map. Hanau, and that's oh no, and I've also got some of Lamont back here. But there's almost nothing in the way. There's 2 functional units sitting here on that Frankfurt road. Now, this is not the battle that happened historically, but for the battle plan that I had, the intention was to get Becker in here and help support it. I think that was probably overly optimistic. The answer, my friends, they're blowing in the wind. The ants are blowing in the wind. The answer is that maybe what I should do is try to pull back somewhere like Hanau or something where I'm still an existent threat, and try to hold off to the end and handle and try to do something to the very rear guard. That doesn't sound like a lot of fun, and as long as I handle it reasonably well, I don't see a way that once I'm out of here that I'm going to be able to deal. This terrain is just too nasty. And honestly, Napoleon's given orders for the guard and the guard artillery to swing around this way. That's potentially really a big problem. Which is, it's hard to find places in Hanau to live. Oh, I released, I took apart the Grand Battery. I'm releasing the units to their individual commands. So that made-up rule is gone. But yeah, I mean, it's quite possible the French could just destroy this force completely. And I'm a little iffy as to whether or not I want to continue, but I'll do the Austrian turn and keep thinking about it. But yeah, this one feels like it's pretty much done. Problems with games that track all the casualty information on sheets of paper. You could make lookups all the time. to figure out what the hell you're doing. But I look at this cav and I'm like, it looks okay. I'm gonna try to charge and maybe knock this cav out and let myself slip some more forces in, whatever. Well, the countercharge happens, and I find out there's only one step to this thing. It's not that terrible. It's it ends up being 2-to-1 in favor of the French. We'll just roll it right now. I don't think there are any other modifiers. And we disorder that thing, and it would have been unable to make additional charges no matter what. And now it's kind of blocking the access here. That's the only cav I think I have over on this side of things. This guy really can't do much without triggering Nansudi, which would not be good. And so I decided I would just force my way through. Cav did a countercharge, and it failed, which is going to cause me problems. I'm going to have a route through situation somewhere. Jeez. Oh well, we'll figure that out. But yeah, so now I have forced my way through with a column and didn't take any casualties. And, hey, that's pretty cool. Noticing another issue. I don't know if it's a problem. It's just an observation, say. So if you're in crappy terrain, like a village or whatever, where you can't really be formed, that means you can't go into square. So you can't do my little trick of turn into a square and start advancing on the cav so that it can't really affect you. So that's creating this real nasty traffic jam up here. Anyway, I'm about to do the French fire, I guess. Things are set up. There basically was no fire combat at all. The Austrians got one shot in on this. That's it. Even the skirmishers have been cleared away. You know, there'd be a French skirmisher in place. Okay, get rid of it. That is something that I actually have a problem with. So the French can deploy a skirmisher during their turn because there's no skirmisher there. And so they don't just cancel out or whatever. That skirmisher gets to fire. On the Austrian turn, they clear that skirmisher so it doesn't get another fire. But basically, one person or the other, depending on who kind of gets there first, whatever, gets a slight advantage on the firepower. Now, it's plinking on the one chart at best. Does it matter much? Well, it didn't when I was in the village at all. But here, yeah, it might end up, it adds to my firepower a little bit, so. All right, that's the end of turn 5. My body is so shot after dancing that actually, you know, I kind of won it. But I felt mentally capable of coming up and playing more today. But when it came down to it, just sort of the thought of coming up was so difficult. And I end up wanting to, you know, catch up on videos that I wasn't catching up on over the course of the week. But I end up thinking, hey, I'll be able to finish this up by the end of the week or whatever. It's just, there's always things that get in my way that prevent me from playing from ending games as quickly as I think I'm going to, and from playing as much. The big factor, I don't play as much as I think I will. I used to play more, and now I'm just finding myself, over the past few years, just more and more kind of, even before I left Phoenix, I just don't feel like I'm as energized to be playing over large periods of time at once. You get this little, oh yeah, play a turn and go downstairs. It's better than half a turn, you know. We got a couple of cav charges, opened things up. First one failed, second one succeeded in breaking, what's his name, Splenny, his remaining cav threat over there. I think that's the end of the cav for the coalition, so without cav, you can't win a Napoleonic battle. It's really kind of that simple. without artillery, maybe sort of, kind of. Uh-oh, these guys got to come off the map. And that is unit, it looks like 14 or something. I can zoom in and see. I don't think it is. I can't get clarity. But on this side, it's readable. It's 34. Like I said, you put it in the color band, and it doesn't work anymore. And we'll throw that out now. Sebastiani pulling his cav down, put a threat on the rear of these units. The coalition is pretty much caught in a vice now with Friant's Guard and even Druid's artillery. And from what I can tell, it's all Guard artillery here. So I'm not dispatching anything. Maybe I screwed up. Maybe there's one that needs to be moved somewhere else. Oh well. Napoleon's going back to talk to Oudinot, get the Young Guard some orders. As it stands, Bertrand, I think, is just going to march off the map. He's just creating traffic jams at this point, with Marmont actually making the main assault over here. And I'm expecting this will be over pretty damn soon. And not sure I'd want to play out the whole thing. The end is obvious. I mean, the end appears obvious to me. The question is, can the Austrians sneak a victory by the weird sort of rules, depending on what the French are allowed to hold back? And again, I feel like that's... I really have to kind of look at what the actual scenario victory... Well, not the victory. Like, the victory is get Marmont off the map, which, why Marmont? I don't know. So the actual units that come in on this are Marmont and Bertrand, some of the Guard artillery, and that's it, and then Oudinot. And basically, I think I've got Oudinot and one other corps command, which would probably be Marmont. I got McDonald still involved over here. So the goal is to get most of the units off as quickly as possible, but leave a small force to, defend this little area as we pull away. Yeah, I mean, it's really going to be, how long does it take me to wipe this stuff out? Because what's sitting in Hanau cannot do much. The French Marmont meleeed in here, bunch of units, pushed things out, made things a little worse there. De Reed has issued some orders to Fresnel or whoever's out there to try to help defend this. That's, nothing too exciting there. Nothing much moved, no rallies, nothing. Pretty much in this position. It's not that expensive to play out in terms of actual time. The problem is my will to do so, but I guess I will keep going. Yeah, it takes like 10-15 minutes to do a turn now. If I mentioned that there's another disordered cav somewhere in the Austrian mix down here. Anyway, and Nansudi taking a well-deserved rest and trying to rally some units as Bertrand takes on the attack here. Those guys are not... I haven't played my skirmishers yet. Let's drop one there. Drop one into there, I guess. Again, it's the advantage to trying to think to being what. It probably generally goes to the defender, but it isn't in this case. And we do have a cav charge here. Failed attempt to create a square. Over here, these guys did create a square, so I didn't waste another charge against them. But, the trap is closing. Friant's coming this way. The Druid's artillery is heading this way. Oudinot is going to take up a rear guard position. I can leave him behind. That's I definitely have to get the old guard out of here by my book. I don't know which corps can stay, which can't, right? And yeah, and Sebastiani led this charge. That's why he's got some fatigue on him. So we'll take shots where I got them. Of Splenny's units is driven off the map. At least I think it's the last of his units. It's not ever trivial to see, but it looks like everything's either taken hits or I've put a circle around it to indicate that it's been routed off the map. Austrians trying to fight back as hard as they can. Unlimbered some guns I found sitting in Hanau. But yeah, it just, just kind of moving pieces around at this point. I'm not sure what I'm really accomplishing, except showing the destruction of a small force of Austrians and Bavarians. Absolutely not what happened historically. The concentration on exiting the map, as it were, in the historical situation took precedence. And, the French, basically the Austrians made an attack against the French rear guard on this day. And instead what we're seeing is a fully present, the entire retreating column is here on the board and very easily able to brush aside the defenses. But the big difference being that the Austro-Bavarians held the defensive line here. And now, this force is just getting eliminated, basically, because, it's not going to be able to withstand the Imperial Guard, the old guard, coming back up on it. And the young guard is going to be up here, too. It's not bad either, It's some pretty damn good shit. Let's see what its firepower is, yeah. Now, it's funny, because firepower is a weird combination. The game does not just take frontage into account when it figures out its firepower. So a unit like this is a 5-step unit with 4 firepower. 9-step grenadiers had 4 firepower. But, it's just, there's so much being abstracted away in this game. I know some people had some objection, well, in particular, this guy Jason, who has a lot of, insight, etc., and knowledge of the historical facts, but seems to hang up on this, on the fact of frontage. The game doesn't take frontage into account at all. That's where the real problem is. It's not, I don't know. Anyway, we got into it over on BGG. Nothing nasty or anything, just disagreement. And, you can pick the one nit, but the point is that there are so many things that are being abstracted away in this system that there's just, you can't try to say, oh, this doesn't handle this facet as well as, a good mini system would, or other decent board games would. There's just so much in this game that's been kind of pushed aside in terms of trying to get a certain level of detail, and it's abstracting things away and saying, you know what, this is what will generally be here. So anyway, and unless you were following the particular conversation on the board, it probably doesn't make much sense to you. But again, yeah, I'm moving pieces around and just demolishing this army, and I'm not sure why. Except that, I've got this kind of odd goal, and one of my viewers pointed out, yeah, this is actually an interesting situation battle. Yeah, but it's not a fun one to play out in this particular case. And I think if you were playing, with the victory, basically the victory conditions that I failed to get significant enough on the first day are such that I don't feel like I can win as decisive a victory as if I had exited a bunch of troops early on. So I don't think hey, let's make 2 days and this is your goal, is a reasonable suggestion, to tell you the truth. I think if you don't get a certain amount of troops off in the first day, you can't win that sort of decisive victory. So now what is my victory? Well, if I were to go with the second day rules, it's the French controlling the road to Frankfurt. And that's it. And, well, there's no way I can stop that, right? So, like, really what it would come to is, I think you'd want a point system where the more troops that the French exit earlier in the 2 days of battle, the better it all is. And maybe the first day is just perfectly fine. If whatever you get off the first day counts like double, and what you get off the second day counts single, but in the end, you win if you control this. I don't know. I really don't know how to represent it all. It just feels to me like the French are not getting as good a victory because they didn't manage to get their troops off as quickly as they should have. And again, this is the kind of stuff you kind of wish the designer had written in. It's clearly a 2-day battle, right? Why break it into 2 one-day battles and not allow one to work off the other? I just find that along the same lines that I find with the 3 battles in Germany. It feels like an unfinished product was handed off. I don't feel that same way with battles that are more cleanly represented. I mean, Waterloo, man, one side wins or loses. There's nothing complex like you got to get your troops off in a certain amount of time. You're trying to, establish a defensive line beyond this. It's just the goals for this. And it doesn't feel like it would be too hard to work out a set of victory conditions. Playing it once, I'm coming up with ideas that are better than the nothing that I'm left with, or trying to piece together what's in here. It just feels lazy to me. And in terms of filling up space or whatever, well, rather than this advertising space, which is also presented here, in the same box, you could have a few rules for how to combine them. Or, honestly, I think that the victory conditions for the first day are really not adequate. They really don't show what the French are trying to do on the first day if they're trying to get their troops off, particularly early as they did historically. So it just feels to me like a little bit more effort could have been put in on that, and that effort wasn't taken. It was this is 2 boxed sets now that I feel like it was just kind of phoned in as to what the victory conditions for the for the game. Well, just everything, how to fit scenarios together and everything. It feels so lightly done. It feels like, a couple more days of work. Could have come up with something maybe not optimal, but it's like there was no attempt made at all even. And I pushed Bertrand off the board. Almost his entire corps is here. He's got an artillery unit to pull off still. Marmont is continuing his attack from here, holding up here as we wait for the old guard to come up and trade some fire. And we get the first leader casualty that maybe I've seen in the game ever. Certainly in the last, couple box sets that I've played. Might have seen one in Waterloo. They're very rare. Although I probably make them rarer than they are because I think, wow, they're very rare. Nice sunrise, by the way. There's a series of things, but the big one is fire combat has to do 2 points of damage, which very seldomly happens. You've got to get huge numbers that I don't tend to, that you don't get from infantry on infantry fire usually. But here I've got 2-to-1 fire going into a number of hexes because the Austrians are so overwhelmed. And otherwise, it's if like a stack is eliminated or an empty hex is reached on. And even then, it's only like a 1 in 6 chance for them to fire combat. From some of the others, it's a little higher, especially if you surround the hex so that there's no easy escape or whatever. But anyway, Becker's is dead. His forces were routed, disordered, caused some rout through. And yeah, I mean, things just look hopeless. The only good thing going for the coalition is they're holding Hanau. Now, it's interesting. I was thinking about meleeing here. I can't. I guess I could form into column and do so, but in line formation where I'm getting good fire odds, I'd be going from a 2 melee base per step to -2. I'm sorry, infantry village -2. Hanau's not as bad. I'm kind of set up to go in there, but I'm not sure I have the orders to do so. My main purpose here is to try to deal with this artillery. That's going to be tough to fight, though, too. Kind of wish I had given myself orders. Actually, Napoleon's not really up to anything. We'll send him over to talk. I think this is Friant here. Maybe give him some additional latitude to go into Hanau, clear that nest out. No luck from the coalition side in terms of changing the flow of this. I mean, really, it's just a matter of getting past these guys, building up some defenses across here. This shit's just not going to be able to come out of Hanau and do much. I don't know what's going to hold my garrison. I guess it'll be Marmont and Oudinot. That sounds like about the right, about the same size as sort of the major victory of getting everyone off the board, except those people. Because I sent Bertrand off. Bertrand would have been able to stay under the original, well, Marmont's not significantly different. Things like Victor or MacDonald, they're too small, and I don't want to just throw them in as bonus units, you know, so they have to go off. Obviously, the guards, the guard cavalry, even Sebastiani's cavalry have to all go. There's basically nothing the coalition has to offer any real fight with, and there's only 4 turns left. That's actually probably the biggest thing is I don't really have the time to get the guard and the artillery off the map in time. So, yeah, we may see the effects of that first day being a serious slowdown on the advance. I don't know. But a serious penalty a stream is to the cavalry on attacking in melee. Now, this Kinzig River is just cav value -1. If you're set up right next to it, I guess, you can charge across the whole river with a fairly high offensive value. But a stream, you have a value of 1. This seems wrong. I mean, this is the more impactful across all other things, and I guess I'll let it sit like that, because probably in prior versions the streams are that impressive. I don't know. I could pull up whatever I was playing last, but it's just again a place where it feels like something's very, very wrong. That, you know, that should have gotten caught in playtesting if it is. I mean, this thing takes you a full turn to cross. Now, here's the other thing. If you fight across the bridge, it counts as a stream. Yeah. It's easier to cross. It feels like they've got it backwards. I don't know. In prior versions, streams are also drop the cav to 1. So I don't know what's intended here, but it seems clear to me that the Kinzig should not be easier to assault across than a stream. I'm going to leave the stream at 1, which is a serious inhibitor to Sebastiani being able to push this forward, and that's fine. Kinzig, if anybody's attacking across it, no, they're not just getting a -1 for it. That is too extreme. Now, there could be cases where your value was already 1, and crossing and getting that -1 could make you completely unable to assault, which is, again, this is some of the fuzziness of the system, is that there are places where something is impossible when it seems easier than something that's just hard. So if you're attacking into other terrain where you'd have a 1, that -1 would keep you from attacking through. Whereas if you're attacking, I don't know if difficult is a 1. Now, difficult's a -1, so that's not much of a problem. Forest has cav value 1. So cav could attack across a stream into a forest with a strength of 1 because it's got that strength of 1 applied twice. It could not attack across the Kinzig into a forest because the Kinzig adds an additional -1, maybe, depending on how you apply these. Right? If you do it in one direction, it ends up at 0. If you do it in the other, it ends up at 1 still. Like, if I apply the -1 first and then apply the cav is at 1. But clearly the common case would be crossing into the clear, and yeah, it's cav is a whole lot more effective, because I mean, we've got cav units that have a melee strength of like 7, right? I mean, yeah, so this has a melee strength of 7 per step, which means I'd be barely affected by the big river. So here we have Druid beginning to set up his artillery to try to silence these guns up on Hanau. Sebastiani does a charge against some disordered units to rout them, send them all the way to hell if I can. And I guess the big thing is Marmont's continuing his attack. We got now both Bertrand and Nansudi off the board. I found some Marmont cavalry that, I don't know, seemed to have been associated with Nansudi. I don't know if it really was or not. But now it's with Marmont. If you remember, at the beginning of the game of the first day, some of the units were like associated with other units, but this could have just gotten kind of mixed up. It's no big deal. It wouldn't have affected anything, even fatigue levels, except if I charged only with that cav and charged it to Nansudi, which I don't believe I did. Napoleon's trying to figure out what the hell he can do. He has no one to really give orders to. What I want to do is get around to Oudinot and give him orders. But mainly I have to break this line here and then set up my defense between Oudinot and Marmont to hold what's here. And that's really about it. Hitting what's left of the line from the rear. We cleared this hex. Lamott ended up surviving, and I guess he snuck through those skirmishers. He's probably dead. I don't know. I don't want to look it up. It really has so little effect on anything. He may not even have a command anymore. A bunch of stuff routing into the city. And I just don't see much left, but we'll see what the Austrians can do in that time. Austrians, and Bavarians, if there's any left, yeah. There's not a whole hell of a lot to do. I'm charging this cav. It caused a couple of squares to be formed, and I'm just going to go through with it because I got to swing these guys around, and I guess, you know, hope for the best, but now my ass is in the air up here. The only good thing that happened for the Austrians out of all of this bounced very little effect. I guess I rallied a couple of units there. Nothing else very impressive. But in terms of a victory, I got 3 turns to get everything off the board, and I don't think I can do it. I think I would have been better off just marching my way out here. This enveloping and surrounding the enemy makes a lot of sense if my victory conditions aren't the ones that I made up. But I'm really bad at remembering, what my goal in a scenario is when it's not defeat the enemy or something like that. However, there's a force coming up on me from here. I got to get these guys out. And, if I can't clear this shit out real quick, I'm in a lot of trouble. There's no forced marches in this game. I've got a bunch of artillery trailing at the back. If anything wakes up here, I could be in some real danger. I was planning on leaving Udino behind to defend, but I'm having trouble getting people off the map that are important. Hoping Friant can make it off. Hoping Druid's artillery can make it out somehow, although I highly doubt that. I'm going to move Udino forward. But here is, and I wrote his orders, but he doesn't get to move yet. Here is the, actually some of these, this guy can move a little. Here's the position we're in. We're just trying to punch our way through. And, there's just not going to be enough Austrian coalition forces to be able to take this hex if I have any defense there whatsoever. But I'm running out of time, and I got to rush the gate. The Austrians, the cav got destroyed here in this sort of hopeless position, right? I've got a square here that, I could actually dismantle that square. I've only got skirmishers firing into my flank, but that sucks, And a square here where I've got real units firing into both flanks. But I don't know whether or not I want the shitty firepower of the square or the slightly better morale value when I'm surrounded, because I'm going to guarantee taking losses. I can get out of this hex, but I'll take opportunity fire, which, I'm delaying the enemy, which is kind of the best thing I think I can hope to do at this time. So I guess I'll just stand. Hey, I got some infantry I can assault. What does the gate do? Gate has no effect, I guess. Yeah, I'm able to attack through it because I might leave it. So yeah, those guns might go. Oops. Now, units that are completely eliminated don't have to leave the map, so they're actually a bonus. I don't know. At the end of turn 11, well, the French movement of turn 11, this is the situation we're in. The Imperial Old Guard and the Old Guard artillery, and maybe Sebastiani, although I think, I don't know. These guys didn't move. They're disordered. That's why Napoleon should probably go over there and help them. Are pretty much going to be holding the back door. There is nothing that can get through them and take this hex. I win the level of I control the Frankfurt Road. Everybody's on their way out. Everything's good. The question is, did I get enough out? Next turn, I will be able to get Marmont, McDonald, Udino, maybe a little bit of Sebastiani off the map. But I got the wrong things holding the door. First of all, that guard artillery has to get moving before the Imperial Guard does. So I'm going to be leaving the Old Guard as my back door. It's stronger than Udino's command. And in addition, Victor is with them. To me, it feels close enough. And if I had pressed a little harder rather than worrying about Hanau at all, maybe I could have pushed a little better. But to me, I feel like I'm close enough that I've succeeded in extracting my entire force. But there's the argument of, I failed on the first day to get most of my forces out. So I'm going to say it's not as big a victory as I would like by any means. It's maybe not as weak as just holding this hex at the end, because I've gotten a lot of troops out on the second day. But again, I think the victory conditions should reflect how many corps you need to get out each day, and you get points for each corps that you extract at different times, or on different days, and then you get a sum to compare. How well did the Bavarian-Austrian coalition forces here do in preventing the French from meeting their major goal? Their major goal is not beat up the Austrians, which is what it is kind of on the first day. And it's not prevent the Austrians from sneaking some guy into the woods who can't actually affect the road. It's control this road so that you can exit the forces. And exiting the forces is of paramount importance. Being able to get the troops through at night probably is of some value. I don't know how you would reflect that aspect of it. Like the nothing is across the Kinzig River is obviously not good enough. This is another one I can't really recommend. It's a single battle like the old AWE ones are. It's not a big battle. It's a situation you don't see very often, right? A retreating force with a force in front of it that the retreating force is significantly more powerful, but that force in front of it has this sort of delay, this desire to delay the retreating force so that the rest of the army can catch up to it after it reorganizes and whatnot. Napoleon's troops are going to be moving faster, so they're not completely routed. They're organized. They're able to fight their way through. It's just something you don't see too often, and that I guess makes it a little bit more interesting. The problem is the victory conditions for it really need some tweaking, and I feel like I can come up with good 2-day victory conditions because I've been thinking about that. The 1-day victory conditions, I think they could be based on the 2-day victory conditions in terms of number of troops that you get out is probably of paramount importance, which it isn't in this scenario. And the hard part is, how do you indicate that I've got enough control of that road? Well, rather than across the Kinzig, I would actually say not adjacent to the road, maybe. Not across the Kinzig and adjacent to the road, or something along those lines. Because, if I can get a little unit out here, that's going to cause some difficulties for Oudinot's forces and whatnot, and Bertrand coming on. And they're going to have to deploy, and they'll be delayed. So if you were doing a 1-day battle, I would kind of go more along those lines. There's a lot that can develop out of this, right? I mean, we saw the coalition holding this area because it wasn't clear that the French terribly wanted that. There were a lot of points if they could get that, but they were winning the battle, and the turns go quicker than you expect, and you get less done than you expect. So, yeah. If the situation is really interesting and you're willing to put the work in, like in so many of this series, I really fear. I'm really thinking that that's the way that I made it work for me was, I kind of like the system. The victory conditions don't quite work. This one's going to be a little harder than most. It took me a play to come up with what the fix needed to be for this. I don't feel like that was so much the case with the old AWE ones, maybe not with the Spanish ones, certainly not with Waterloo, but that's a big enough game that my thought was on it long enough. This one, I came up with victory conditions that kind of work for the second day, but they're not fully sketched out, because I think what it should be is something like the number of steps you pull out with maybe old guard doubled and the old guard and the guard cav and guard artillery as well, giving you some kind of point value. And on the first day, probably double again, or something like that. And on the second day, you'd just be getting the base value, because you don't want the French leaving the old guard on the field. You want that moving forward and getting to where it needs to go more quickly. And but minimally having everything so it can be extracted is your minimal victory conditions. I also kind of don't like the fact that the coalition has victory conditions that are, well, you either win or lose, whereas the French has 2 levels of victory. It's a minor nitpick, but the biggest thing is that the victory conditions don't express the goals of either army. Certainly not on the first day. They're far too concerned with, counting points for step losses and stuff like that. Yeah, that shit matters. And it's going to weaken, if you beat up enough of the enemy, they're going to have a harder time getting their formations off in the second day. But honestly, if you make it all French step losses throughout both days that get off, the only thing you might end up encouraging with that is too heavy a fight from the coalition side, but they're gonna break, And if you count, maybe give them a penalty on step losses on that first day, but make it the minor part of the whole point value, because it's really not that important. I mean, I think it's more important getting the troops off the board. Anyway, not going right away to Leipzig. Got something else I want to do first. So up this goes, and again, it's another one of these kind of weekly developed games. Unless this particular battle situation is really, really intriguing to you, and you want to go at it with your tongs and hammer and try to figure out how to beat it into something that works a little bit better, I'd stay away from that.